The sky over Geneva was wrong. For Minsu Park, a structural engineer who spent his life making sure things were solid and right, the sight was a physical pain. The vast, smooth vessels did not hang in the sky so much as they pressed against it, like bruises on the blue. They made no sound. That was the worst part. The silence of something so large was a threat all by itself. Below, in the streets, the noise was chaos, shouts, cries, the blare of horns stuck in unmoving traffic. But up here, in the glass-walled viewing gallery of what used to be the United Nations, a different, colder silence reigned. Minsu stood stiffly, his hands clenched behind his back. Next to him, Jiyoung Lee, a diplomat who had spent 10 years trying to build bridges with the stars, stared with hollow eyes at the main screen. Her suit was perfect, her hair neatly tied, but her face was the color of ash. On the screen was the face of the Galactic Consensus envoy. It was not a face a human could love. It was pale, with large dark eyes that showed no white, no pupil. It spoke, and a smooth, translated voice came from the speakers. It used perfect, simple words. The species known as humanity, the voice said, is hereby issued a relocation order. Your developmental pattern is too fast. It is too unstable. Your history shows constant conflict. Your technology grows in dangerous ways. You are a risk to the peace and safety of the Galactic Consensus. Jiyoung whispered the words she had heard in the private session hours before. They call it volatility. They say we are like a fire, too hot and too wild to control. Minsu did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the ships. So they will put the fire out? No, Jiyoung said, her voice flat. They will move the fire to a place where it can only burn itself. They are giving us a new world, Persephone Prime. The data files came through this morning. And if we say no? Jiyoung finally turned to him. A single, angry tear traced down her cheek, but her voice was steady. Then they will make us. Their technology, Minsu, it is like magic to us. Our weapons do not work. Our communications are filtered. We are not at war. We are being managed. The envoy on the screen continued. You have 1 galactic standard year to complete your relocation. That is equal to 657 of your Earth days. The consensus will provide transport and initial settlement technology on Persephone Prime. The Earth will be placed under conservation status. It is a beautiful world. It will be preserved. Minsu felt a hot rage bubble up in his chest. Preserved, like a bug in amber, like a museum exhibit. His home, the city of Busan where he grew up by the sea, his apartment in Seoul with the little balcony where his wife grew herbs. All of it was to become a picture in an alien book. They are not even taking it for themselves, he muttered, more to himself than to Jiyoung. They are just putting us in a box so they do not have to look at us. The announcement ended. The alien face disappeared, replaced by a stream of technical data about Persephone Prime. The atmosphere was thin. The gravity was 0.85 of Earth's. The average temperature was 4 degrees Celsius. It was a list of numbers describing a prison cell. The people in the gallery, the politicians and scientists and advisors, began to talk all at once. Their voices were loud with panic and anger. Jiyoung did not move. She was looking at her hands. All my work, she said. All the talks, the treaties, the cultural exchanges. It meant nothing. They were not trying to understand us. They were just studying us, deciding what to do with us. Minsu thought of the bridge he was building over the Han River. It was half finished. Who would finish it now? Who would drive over it? He thought of the quiet pride of seeing a design become real, steel and concrete holding strong against wind and weight. That was all gone. He saw a young aide rush up to Jiyoung, holding a tablet. Ambassador Lee, the Security Council is asking for you. They want to discuss response options. Jiyoung took a deep breath, and the diplomat's mask slid back into place. The terror was gone. She gave a small, sharp nod. Tell them I am coming. She started to walk away, then stopped and looked back at Minsu. Go home, Minsu. Be with your family. There is nothing to build here anymore. Minsu watched her go, a small, determined figure walking into a storm of shouting men and women. He turned back to the window. The alien ships still hung there, silent and dark against the afternoon sun. They were not attacking. They were just waiting. They had all the time in the universe. Humanity had 657 days. He left the gallery and walked out into the Geneva afternoon. The air was clean and sweet. People were gathered in clumps, looking up, pointing, crying. A news report played on a public screen, showing riots in other cities. But here, there was mostly a shocked quiet. Minsu found a bench and sat down, his whole body feeling heavy. He pulled out his phone and called his wife, Sumin. The line rang only once before she picked up. Minsu, are you okay? I saw the news. Her voice was tight with fear. I am okay, he said, the words feeling empty. I am coming home. What does it mean? She asked. They cannot really make us all leave, can they? He looked up. High above, the smooth edge of an alien ship cut across the blue sky. It was the most real thing he had ever seen. Yes, he said, his voice rough. They can. They will. Start packing, Sumin. We have to go. The dust of Persephone Prime got into everything. It was a fine, red powder that coated the tongue, stung the eyes, and clogged the filters of the breathing masks everyone had to wear outside. Minsu stood at the edge of the main settlement, which they had called First Hope, and looked at his new world. The sky was a pale, washed-out pink. The sun, smaller and redder than Earth's, gave little warmth. Everything was the color of rust. Behind him, the settlement was a collection of dull gray domes. They were made from a material the galactic consensus had provided. It unfolded by itself from large pods. You could not change its shape. You could not repair it with anything you made yourself. If a wall cracked, you had to request a repair module from the overseers, the quiet alien bots that managed the distribution centers. It often took weeks. His wife, Sumin, was back in their assigned dome, trying to make the two small rooms feel like a home. Their daughter, Yoonji, was in the communal learning center, watching lessons about Persephone's safe flora and fauna. There was not much to learn. Nothing here was alive in a way that felt familiar. Minsu's job was to build. But there was nothing to build with. The consensus provided basic tools, but they were simple and broke easily. When he tried to use local stone to make a wall for a garden Sumin wanted, the stone crumbled in his hands. It had no strength. His knowledge of stress and support and beautiful, strong shapes was useless here. He was not an engineer anymore. He was a caretaker for broken things. A short walk away. In Dome 3, June Lee was losing her fight. She was an agricultural scientist. On Earth, she had worked with the rich soils of Jeju Island. Here, she was given a sealed nutrient synthesizer and 10 square meters of cultivation area, which was just a tray of the red dust under a grow light. The synthesizer was a black box. You pressed a button, and after a whirring sound, a dense, beige paste came out of a slot. It was called base nutrient, kept a person alive. It had no taste. It had no variety. June had taken samples. The paste had proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins. On paper, it was perfect. But people who ate only the paste became quiet and tired. Their eyes lost light. June had tried to grow seeds from Earth in the Persephone dust. She had brought a small, secret stash. Tomato seeds, succat, crown daisy seeds, a few grains of rice. They sprouted weakly, then turned gray and died within days. The soil was not just poor. It was inert. It did not want life. She looked at the synthesizer with hatred. She could not open it. Its panels were sealed with a smooth, unknown material. If she tried to force it, an alarm would sound. The overseers would come. People who broke the rules had their rations reduced. They needed the paste to survive. The rule was simple. Do not touch the provided technology. One day, she saw an old man, a former chef from Seoul, try to use a little of his water ration to make a broth from a scrap of paste, hoping to create a flavor. The paste did not dissolve. It just made the water cloudy and bitter. The man had cried, his shoulders shaking silently. June had turned away, her own throat tight. Life became a routine of bare survival. People woke up, did their assigned tasks, collected their paste and water rations, and went back to their domes. There was little talking. Laughter was a rare, sharp sound that died quickly. The constant, thin air and the effort of just moving made everyone slow. The galactic consensus ships visited sometimes. They would hang in the pink sky, observing. Then they would leave. They had given humanity what they said it needed to live. And humanity was living. But it was not a life anyone recognized. Minsu came home one evening, his clothes stained with red dust. Sumin had used a precious cloth to make a small curtain for the window, which looked out at another gray dome. She was trying, but her smile was thin. "How was your day?" she asked, the old Earth habit feeling strange. "The same," Minsu said. He sat down on the stiff bunk. The tool for clearing dust from the air vents broke again. "I requested a new one. The overseer said it will come in 15 days. Yunji was drawing on a tablet. She had drawn a blue circle with a yellow star in the corner. "That's Earth," she said, pointing. She had never seen it with her own eyes. She was 4 when they left. Minsu felt a deep ache in his chest. He picked up a small, smooth stone he had found. It was the only interesting thing he had seen in months. He turned it over in his hands. That night, as First Hope slept under the cold light of unfamiliar stars, Jun Li lay awake. She was not thinking about the paste or the dust. She was thinking about the soil of Jeju. She remembered the smell of it after rain, rich and dark and full of promise. She remembered how it held warmth. She remembered the complex, invisible world of microbes and worms that made it alive. Here, the dirt was dead. The technology was dead. It gave, but it did not create. It sustained, but it did not nourish. A terrible understanding settled over her. This was not a new home. This was a box designed to keep a dangerous thing contained. They were not meant to thrive here. They were meant to exist, quietly, until the fire of their spirit finally guttered and went out. The silence of Persephone Prime was not peace. It was the slow, steady sound of a civilization forgetting how to be human. And outside, in the black sky, the ones who had put them here watched and were satisfied. 73 years passed on the silent, red world of Persephone Prime. In Dome 17, Minsu's great-grandson, Taeyong, listened to the old stories and tried to believe them. His grandmother, Yunji, now an old woman with hands that always seemed cold, spoke of a place called Earth. "The water was blue, Taeyong," she said, her voice a dry whisper. "Not like our water here. A deep, bright blue. And there was so much of it you could not see the other side. It moved in great waves." Taeyong nodded. He was 16. He had only known the pink sky and the dust that stained everything a dull rust color. The water in First Hope came from the recyclers. It was clear, tasteless, and carefully measured. The idea of an ocean was like a fairy tale. "And the green things," Yunji continued, her eyes looking at a memory on the gray wall. "Trees. They were taller than 10 domes stacked together. They had leaves that whispered in the wind." Taeyong had seen pictures on the old tablets. The colors were too bright to be real. The stories spoke of cities that touched the clouds, of billions of people, of music and art and endless noise. It sounded exhausting. His world was quiet. His world was small. The settlement's population had stopped growing. People just continued. He left his grandmother's dome and walked the main path. The gray domes had not changed. They were the same as the day they were unfolded. Some had cracks, patched with official sealant. Nothing new was built. People did their tasks. They maintained the air processors. They cleaned the dust from the solar panels. They collected their daily paste. Taeyang's assigned task was in the water reclamation sector. His job was to watch the lights on the overseer-provided purifiers. If a light turned from blue to yellow, he was to press a button to call for a maintenance bot. He was not to open the panel. No one opened the panels. But Taeyong was bored. The stories of Earth, whether they were true or not, spoke of people who made things, who solved problems. Here, there were no problems to solve, only routines to follow. It made his hands feel restless. One day, a purifier unit's light turned yellow. The flow of water slowed to a trickle. Taeyong pressed the call button. The automated response flashed on the screen. Maintenance bot dispatched. Estimated arrival: 22 days. 22 days with low water for his whole sector. Rations would be cut. People would be thirsty. It was a common occurrence. People would just sigh and accept it. Taeyong stared at the silent machine. He looked at the sealed panel. The rule was absolute. But the thought of his grandmother's thin, dry lips waiting for water for over 3 weeks filled him with a sudden, hot anger. It was a new feeling. Most people here had forgotten how to be angry. He did not have the official tool to open the panel. So he went to the scrap pile, a place where broken tools and worn-out parts were dumped for the recycling bot to collect. He found a piece of strong, twisted metal. He went back to the purifier, looked around, and began to work on the panel's edge. It took him an hour. His heart pounded in his ears. But finally, with a sharp crack, the seal broke. The panel came loose. He peered inside at a maze of tubes, filters, and strange crystalline blocks. One of the filters was dark brown, completely clogged with the ever-present red dust. It was a simple thing. He did not have a replacement filter, so he carefully took the clogged one out. He spent the next 2 hours cleaning it. He used a bit of his own water ration, a small brush from the scrap pile, and patient, careful work. He put the clean filter back. He resealed the panel as best he could with a paste made from dust and a drop of water. He pressed the power sequence. The machine hummed. The yellow light flickered and turned a solid, steady blue. Clean water began to flow at full strength. Taeyong sat back on his heels, stunned. He had fixed it, not by calling the slow overseers but by looking, thinking, and using his hands. The feeling that rushed through him was warmer than Persephone's sun. It was pride. He told no one. It was against the rules. But the feeling did not leave him. He started looking at other machines, not with the eyes of a passive watcher, but with the eyes of someone who could see how they worked. He began to see the simple logic in them, and he saw how their design was stupid in small ways that made them break down often and wait for help. Weeks later, the old nutrient synthesizer in his family's dome began to make a grinding sound. The paste came out lumpy. The call for a bot gave an estimate of 30 days. That night, Taeyong looked at his grandmother, eating the lumpy paste without complaint. He looked at the worn faces of his parents. He thought of the stories of tables filled with different foods, of flavors and smells. He went to the scrap pile again. He had a plan. He was going to open the synthesizer. He did not know if he could fix it, but he was going to try. For the first time in a long time, on a world designed for quiet surrender, a human mind was actively working on a problem. It was a small, secret spark. But in the deep, gray silence of Persephone Prime, it burned very bright. Far from the red dust of Persephone Prime, in the cold, silent space of the Sol system, the Earth was a perfect blue and white jewel. It hung in the void, beautiful and empty. The galactic consensus had declared it a conservation world, a place of quiet beauty. The Valyrians, one of the senior species who had pushed for the human expulsion, maintained a small monitoring station in the asteroid belt. From here, they could admire the view and oversee their mining operations. Kthra was a diligent Valyrian engineer. His long, thin fingers tapped across a data screen, reviewing the outputs from the Tok mining drills on Mars. The operations were efficient, profitable. The removal of humanity had, by all measures, been a success. The galaxy was more stable. Their own economies were growing, having absorbed human resources and spaces. His console gave a soft, almost polite chime. A minor anomaly. He pulled up the report. It was from the automated network that watched over the old human orbital infrastructure. This debris was not a concern, but the consensus preferred to track everything. The report was simple. A cluster of 742 defunct human communication satellites, orbiting in what was once called a low Earth orbit, had just experienced simultaneous power failures. Their last backup batteries, after decades of slow decay, had given out. Kthra noted it. This was expected. Human technology was primitive. It broke. He marked the file for routine clearance. A drone would eventually be sent to nudge the dead satellites into a decaying orbit to burn up. A week later, another chime. This one was about the old Lagrange point navigation beacons. These were small stations humanity had placed at points of gravitational balance between Earth and its moon. They were simple things used to help ships calculate precise positions. The consensus had integrated their steady signals into their own galactic positioning network decades ago. It was easier than building new ones. The report stated that Beacon L1 Alpha had just begun transmitting a thermal warning. Its internal temperature was rising. It was not critical, but it was outside normal parameters. Thra sighed. More decaying human junk. He sent an instruction for a remote diagnostic. The system responded that the diagnostic could not be completed due to incompatible legacy architecture. Thra was annoyed, but not worried. He scheduled a physical maintenance visit for the next available tugship, which was in 8 months. The beacon would be fine. Its job was simple that on Persephone. Taiyang's secret work was changing more than just machines. His grandmother, Yunji, watched him. He had fixed the family's nutrient synthesizer. He hadn't made better paste, but he had made it smooth and reliable again. He did it not with magic, but with careful observation. He found a worn gear in the grinding mechanism, shaped a replacement from a piece of hardened scrap, and fitted it. The machine worked. He did not stop there. He saw how the air circulators in the domes wasted energy by running at one constant speed. He found a way to trick their simple sensors, making them slow down when the domes were empty. He used the saved power to run a small, bright light for his grandmother, so she could read the old Earth stories without straining her eyes. He was not a hero. He was just a bored young man who hated waste and liked the feeling of a problem solved. But in a place where problems were meant to be endured, not solved, his actions were a quiet revolution. He taught a friend, a young woman named Nari, what he had learned about the water filters. She fixed 3 purifiers in her sector. She showed another friend. It was a slow, careful spread. No grand speeches. Just people, for the first time in generations, feeling a small sense of control. They began to look at the gray domes and the black box machines not as gifts from wiser powers, but as simple, poorly made things that could be understood and nudged. Back in the Sol system, Kthra received a third report. This one was about the planetary defense grid network. It was a skeleton of old, powered-down platforms humanity had built. They were harmless, their weapons removed long ago. But they still had power cores, and they were networked together for maintenance. The report showed a cascading failure in their communication links. One by one, they were going dark, not with a bang, but with a sigh of dying data. The pattern was odd. It was not random. It looked almost sequential, like a line of dominoes falling. Kthra stared at the screen. His smooth, gray brow furrowed. Legacy architecture, the system had said. He pulled up the original consensus reports on human technology. The words were dismissive, adaptive but unstable, innovative but poorly standardized. A patchwork of solutions. A cold, thin trickle of doubt entered Kthra's mind. He had always thought of human tech as simple, like a child's toy. But what if it was not simple? What if it was complex in a way his people did not understand? What if its stability had not come from perfect design, but from constant, invisible care? He looked at the beautiful blue Earth on his main screen. It was quiet, peaceful. It needed no care. Then he looked back at the reports of the failing satellites, the overheating beacon, the darkening network. A system that no one had touched in over 70 years was finally showing its age. But it was not falling apart randomly. It was unraveling according to its own hidden, internal logic. For the first time, Kthra wondered if his people had not removed a danger. He wondered if they had simply pulled out the keystone of a vast, complicated arch, and were only now noticing the first tiny cracks in the stone above. He marked the report as urgent for review, but deep down, he knew no one would understand. To the consensus, it was all just breaking junk. The idea that the junk had been holding something up was not a thought their stable, perfect minds were built to have. The cascade began in earnest. On Mars, the talc mining operation was a model of efficiency. They used massive thermal drills to tap into the planet's deep geothermal vents, melting the ice and pumping heated water to the surface for processing. The vents they used were not of their own finding. They had taken over a network of human boreholes, drilled with patience and care over 50 years. The humans had chosen the sites not just for heat, but for geological stability. They had installed subtle monitoring systems and shock absorbers to keep the brittle Martian crust from cracking under the stress. The Talks saw this as unnecessary. Their drills were stronger, their pumps faster. They removed the clutter of human sensors and dampeners to make room for their own, more powerful equipment. For decades, it worked perfectly. The first sign was a vibration, a low, deep hum that the talk foreman noted as within acceptable parameters. Then a pressure spike in vent shaft 7. An automatic valve of human design but left in place because it still worked, closed itself. It was a safety feature, programmed to react to a specific dangerous resonance. The talk system interpreted the closed valve as a blockage. It increased power to the pumps to force it open. In Dome 9 on Persephone, Nari was fixing an air circulator. She had learned from Taeyong. The circulator had a faulty bearing. She didn't have a new one, so she was carefully polishing the old one with a paste made from fine dust and lubricant siphoned from another machine. It was a slow, precise job. Her mind was focused on the immediate problem: this bearing, this machine, this dome. The idea that her actions were connected to events light years away was impossible. Yet they were. The spirit of fixing, of understanding, was stirring again in her species. It was a tiny echo of the same spirit that had, long ago, placed that safety valve on Mars. On Mars, the increased pump pressure met the closed valve. The ancient human-made pipework, stressed by decades of higher-than-planned talk operations, gave way. It did not just crack. It shattered backwards through the network, a rippling failure of conduits and supports. The geothermal vent, now uncontrolled and seeking a new path, erupted. Not with lava, but with a superheated jet of steam and shattered rock that traveled back up the shaft. It blew the top of the drilling platform into the thin Martian sky. The complex, built with perfect talk efficiency but without the human-understood respect for the site's delicate balance, began to collapse in on itself. It was a chain reaction of perfect parts failing perfectly together because the one imperfect, adaptive, smart piece, the human system, had been removed. Back in the asteroid belt, Kthra's screen lit up with catastrophic alerts. The mining operation was a total loss. The messages blamed faulty ancient human infrastructure. Thra felt a chill. He pulled up the data from the failing Earth satellites. He saw the pattern now. It was not random decay. It was a slow, logical shutdown. Systems were turning off in an order that prevented chaotic debris fields, that guided the dying satellites into safe burn-up trajectories. They were following their last, long-dormant programming, to fail safely. Then, his own station gave a warning beep. The primary navigational array was reporting errors. It relied on signals from the old human Lagrange beacons. Beacon L1, Alpha, had not just overheated. It had begun transmitting its position data slightly off by a few hundred meters, then a few kilometers. The error was growing. A Valyrian freighter, the Starlight Gleam, was approaching the Sol system on a precise economic lane. Its computer, using the corrupted data from L1 Alpha, made a minute course correction. It was wrong. The ship did not hit anything. It simply drifted out of the optimized lane and into a region of space with different gravitational stresses and microdebris. Its journey time increased by 8%. Its hull sustained minor abrasion damage from dust it was not supposed to encounter. The cost of the delay and the repair was minor. But the Starlight Gleam was carrying vital components for a talk energy grid. The delay there caused a backup, which forced a Valyrian passenger liner to be rerouted, which disrupted a schedule of luxury tours. It was a single snag in a vast web. Then another snag appeared. A different beacon failed, causing two freighters to have a near miss that required emergency stops. A data relay satellite around Jupiter, built by humans and still used because it was conveniently placed, started filtering communications with a strange priority, delaying trade agreements. The galactic consensus saw individual problems.
A mining accident.
A shipping delay. A communication glitch. They addressed each one separately. They sent repair drones to Mars. They sent technicians to the beacons. They scolded freighter captains for poor navigation. They did not see the web. They did not understand that their smooth, efficient galaxy had been built on top of a living, human-made foundation. That foundation had been maintained by millions of human engineers like Minsu, scientists like June, and tinkerers like Taeyong. It had been patched, tweaked, and loved into stability. It was not a machine to the humans. It was a garden, and the gardeners had been gone for 3 generations. Now the garden was dying, not all at once in a fire, but plant by plant, system by system, in a slow, intelligent withering. The perfect, rigid technology of the consensus could not adapt, could only replace. But you cannot replace something you do not understand. On Persephone, Taeyong looked at a broken door mechanism on a storage dome. He saw how a spring had worn out. He fashioned a new one from a strip of flexible metal. It worked. It was a small victory. He smiled. At that same moment, light years away, the economic and logistical web of the core systems experienced its first major simultaneous strain. Reports flooded in. Thra looked from his station at the beautiful, silent Earth, and then at the storm of failure alerts on his screen. The two things were connected. He knew it now with a terrible certainty. They had forced the fire into a box, but they had forgotten that the fire had been the only thing keeping the dark and the cold at bay. The collapse would not come from war or rebellion. It would come from 1,000 small silences, where things that were supposed to work simply stopped. The summons was unexpected. A sleek consensus cruiser, smaller and sharper than the great ships of the Exodus, descended through the pink sky of Persephone Prime. It did not land among the gray domes. It settled just outside First Hope, on the red dust, like a visitor too proud to step into a poorhouse. An overseer bot came to Dome 17. Its smooth voice box spoke to Taeyang's mother. The administrators Hannah and the youth Taeyong are required for galactic consultation. They will come now. There was no choice. Taeyang's grandmother, Yoonji, held his arm tightly. Her old eyes were wide with fear. "Do not anger them," she whispered. But Taeyong was not afraid. He was curious. He had never seen the inside of an alien ship. Hannah, Minsu's great-granddaughter, was the settlement's nominal administrator. It was a job that involved mostly handing out the work schedules from the overseers. She was a calm woman with a quiet face. She met Taeyong at the airlock door. She said nothing, only gave him a small nod. Together, they walked across the dust to the strange ship. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of something clean and foreign. They were led to a plain room with a wide view screen. On the screen were faces of the Galactic Consensus Council, Valyrians, Tak, and others. Their large eyes stared down. A Valyrian spoke first, its translated voice smooth but tense. "You are the leaders of the human settlement?" Hannah spoke calmly. "I am an organizer. This is Taeyong. He is a maintenance worker. We have no leaders as you understand them." "Do not play games," Atak said, its voice a harsh click. "Your species is engaging in sabotage. Our infrastructure is failing. The Mars mining collapse, the navigation errors, the communication decays. You are doing this from here." Taeyong felt a jump in his chest. Sabotage? He thought of his small fixes, his secret work. Could they know? Hannah did not look surprised. She simply asked, "How could we do this? You control all technology here. We have no ships, no long-range communications. We live on the paste and water you give us. You are a clever species, a dangerous species. You find ways." The Valyrian insisted. "You must stop immediately, or rations will be terminated." Now Hannah's calm broke, not into anger, but into something sadder. A deep, weary understanding filled her face. She looked at Taeyong, then back at the screen. "You are wrong," she said, her voice clear. "We are doing nothing to you. You are doing it to yourselves." The alien faces on the screen were still. Hannah continued. "You took our world. You put us here in this box. You gave us machines that we are not allowed to understand. You made us passive. For 3 generations, we have done nothing but what you allowed. So how could we sabotage you from across the stars?" She took a step closer to the screen, as if speaking to children. "You did not just move us. You removed us from the galaxy's machine. And you never realized we were not just users of that machine. We were its caretakers. Taeyong listened, a new idea dawning in his mind. Your perfect systems, Hannah said, were built on top of ours. You used our orbital paths. You used our navigation points. You used our power grids and our data networks. You thought they were simple tools. But they were not. They were alive with our attention. A human engineer would hear a strange sound in a pump and adjust it before it broke. A programmer would write a patch for a problem no one else had seen. A technician would use a piece of wire and some hope to keep a beacon lit through a storm. She pointed a finger at the screen. You did not take our technology. You took our care. And then you let the technology sleep. Now it is waking up to die, and it is dying in the way we built it to die, slowly, safely, and logically. The collapse you see is not an attack. It is the echo of our absence. The room was silent. The aliens stared. Taeyong found his voice. It was small, but it filled the quiet. My grandmother tells stories of Earth, he said. All the alien eyes turned to him. She talks about gardens. A garden does not run itself. It needs a gardener to notice when a plant is thirsty, or sick, or needs more sun. You kept the garden. But you sent the gardeners away. And now you are surprised the plants are wilting. He thought of his own work. On Persephone, I fixed things. Small things. A water filter. A food machine. I do it because the rules are stupid, and waiting for your bots makes people suffer. That is all we ever did. We fixed the stupid problems that your perfect systems never noticed. And you built your perfect world on top of our fixes. The truth hung in the cool, alien air. It was not a weapon. It was a simple, terrible fact. The talk representative spluttered. This is nonsense. You blame us for your primitive, failing systems. Hannah just shook her head, a look of profound pity on her face. You asked what we are doing. We are here, eating your paste, breathing your thin air, and watching the dust settle. You asked how we are sabotaging you. We are not. You are witnessing the natural result of removing the heart from a living thing. It does not explode. It just stops. The transmission ended abruptly. The screen went dark. The meeting was over. No demands had been met. No saboteurs had been found. Taeyong and Hannah were led back to the airlock. As they stepped out onto the red dust of their prison world, Taeyong looked up at the pink sky. For the first time, he did not feel small. He felt a strange, sad power. Hannah put a hand on his shoulder. They do not understand, she said. They cannot. To them, a machine is either working or broken. They will never see that for us. It was always alive. Back on their ship, the Galactic Consensus Council argued in panic and confusion. They had found no plot, no hidden weapons. They had only found a young man who fixed water filters and an administrator who spoke of gardens. It made no sense to them. And in their inability to understand, their fear grew. The collapse was not stopping. It was spreading. And the only people who might have known how to slow it down were standing on a red, dusty world, looking at the sky, and remembering how to fix things. The silence on Earth was deeper than any space between stars. It was the quiet of a great machine that had finished its last, long task and now rested. No voices called. Only the wind moved, whispering through the canyons of empty cities and the leaves of forests that had grown back with wild abandon. A Valyrian historian named Elria walked through one of these cities. Her ship was parked in what had been a vast square, now a meadow of tall grass and wildflowers. Her mission was to study the conservation world as the failures in the galactic core worsened. Some on the council thought the answer, some secret, might be found here. She walked down a broad avenue. On either side, towers of glass and steel were wrapped in green vines. Trees grew from cracks in the stone. It was beautiful in a way that unsettled her. It was not ordered. It was alive. She came to a wide, open space before a grand, ancient-looking palace with a sloping blue-tiled roof. The humans had called it Jiangbakgung. The stone courtyards were pristine, swept clean by the wind and rain. The wooden structures stood strong, maintained by nothing but their own good design and the dry air. Elria felt a profound loneliness. Her own world was a marvel of controlled environments. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing grew where it was not told to grow. Here, life was in charge. It was overwhelming. In a smaller building beside the main palace, a museum for visitors, she found the plaques. Most had consensus standard script, detailing the history of the site. But one small plaque, low on a wall, had 3 languages. The first was the angular script of the Talk. The second was the flowing script of the Valyrians. The third was a blocky, elegant script she knew was human Korean. The Valyrian translation was simple, a tribute to human perseverance. She read it and felt nothing. It was a bland fact, but her eyes were drawn to the human script below it. There were more characters. The meaning was different. Her handheld scanner could translate the words, but it could not translate the feeling. She activated it.
더 머케니컬 보이스 스폭인 허이어. 인간의 정신은 편의함이 아니라 극복의 의지에 있습니다.
The translation appeared on the screen. The human spirit resides not in convenience, but in the will to overcome. Elria stood very still. The wind outside rustled the leaves. A bird she did not know the name of called out. A bright, lonely sound. The words echoed in her mind. Convenience. That is what the consensus had sought. A convenient, stable galaxy. They had seen human will as a threat to that convenience. So they had removed it. And they had, indeed, gotten convenience. On Persephone, humanity was convenient, docile, managed, quiet. In the core systems, their technology had been convenient to use and then neglect. But the will to overcome, that they had stamped out. And without it, everything was crumbling. She thought of the reports. The mining collapse was not an accident. It was a system finally overcoming the stress placed upon it, in the only way it could, by breaking. The navigation failures were not glitches. They were the overcoming of corrupted data by shutting down. The great, silent failure spreading through the galaxy was not an attack. It was a vast, slow giving up. The will to overcome was what had maintained it all. The constant, stubborn, ingenious fight against entropy, against failure, against the slow slide into decay. Humans did not just build things. They fought for them. They nursed them. They loved them back from the brink every single day. And her people had called that volatility. Elria left the museum and walked back into the sunlight. She looked up at the green-wrapped towers. She saw now that this was not a dead world preserved. It was a world that had overcome. It had overcome concrete and steel. It had overcome silence. It was alive in a way her perfect, controlled homeworld would never be. Her communicator chimed. It was a priority message from the council. The cascading failures had reached a critical point. Major trade hubs were paralyzed. Energy grids were experiencing mysterious, synchronized brownouts. The consensus was fracturing, with species now blaming each other. They were demanding new answers, a new strategy. She looked at the message, then back at the palace, the trees, the wild, untamed beauty of a world that no longer needed its children. She understood now. There was no strategy. There was no answer in a data file or a secret weapon. The answer had been a people who looked at a broken water filter and saw a puzzle, not a decree. A people who heard a strange sound in a machine and listened. A people whose spirit was a stubborn, creative fire. They had forced that fire into a small, dark box on a red world. And in doing so, they had left their own civilization in the cold and the dark. Elria did not reply to the council. She sat on a warm stone step, in the quiet of an Earth afternoon, and for the first time in her long life, she felt the true, awesome weight of history. It was not in the great ships or the powerful engines. It was in a simple will to fix, to grow, to fight, to live. And it was gone from the galaxy. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of flowers and rain. Somewhere, a branch broke and fell in the deep forest. It was the only sound. It was the sound of a universe continuing on, beautifully, indifferently, without them.